To this now, the Medical Scheme Council has called on its members to keep medical aid contribution increases in line with projected inflation. This as the rising inflation and interest hikes are increasingly making the cost of living unaffordable for most South Africans. Here to tell us a little bit more about what drives this kind of thinking and what are the numbers based on, we have with us from the Council of the Medical Aid Scheme Executive for Regulation, Mfana Maswanganyi. We also have the chairperson for the National Healthcare Professionals Association, Dr. Gumede, to help us in the conversation. Gentlemen, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us tonight up here on In Focus. Mr. Maswanganyi, let me begin with you. Except for 2021, at least for the last decade or so, medical aid schemes have been allowed to have increases that are way above the CPI levels. Why so? And we know why you decided to do that in 2021, to put a cap, and then we'll get into why we decided to put a cap now. But why have they been allowed almost for the past decade or so to be having increases that are above CPI?
Good evening, Tao, and good evening to your viewers. So what we do is every year we issue a circular as a guidance to the medical schemes industry in terms of benefit increase. This is not something new, it's something that we do every year. And we always have used inflation as projected by the South African Reserve Bank. So we say to the industry that whenever they want to increase their contributions, they need to take into consideration the projected CPI by the South African Reserve Bank. And whatever increase that they propose to us, it has to be supported by actuarial evidence that the schemes have to conduct before they submit those contributions, the proposals to us for approval.
Yeah. Up until this point, as I put it, those increases have been above CPI. Has there been no concern from the regulator itself that these increases were maybe a little bit exorbitant?
Yeah. So the responsibility on us, Tabo, is that we have to strike a balance between affordability from the member's point of view and the long-term sustainability of the medical scheme. And the middle ground has always been the CPI. But medical schemes where evidence or factors pertaining to their own financial situation suggest or indicates that they should have an increase above the CPI, we look at that, and if it's justifiable, we would approve it. But if it's not justifiable and backed by evidence that has to do with the particular scheme's finances, we will not approve that.
Now, according to, I think it was 2006 figures, Dr. Donald, those numbers could have gone up quite significantly in 2022. Yeah. 8.2 million households were without medical aid scheme. And the challenge is that with those kind of increases, there was seemingly no work being done towards bringing low-income earners within the membership of these schemes.
Yeah, thank you, Tabo. I hope I'm audible. Thank you very much, and good evening to my colleague as well. Yeah, I think we must first acknowledge the fact that all the discussions that we are having now, it's actually, it must be pointed out that what the CMS does, it gives recommendations. And I think we must underline that term, recommendations, because you see, they can do all the mathematics and all that, but the schemes themselves still have the final word on what they have to give to the clients or to the patients. And to me, that's concerning, because you see, CMS is a statutory body that is supposed to regulate the medical aid industry. So, like even this 5.7% cap, case in point, the 2021-2022 cap that they've given out there for 4.2% increment cap. The medical aids, they did not stick to that. They went up, one of them discovered by, I think, around 5.2 to 7.9 increment. So actually, the recommendations are not binding. They are just focused to say you can do as you please, but we would like you to be under the CPI index. But it's not good enough, because then the ordinary patient cannot afford these increments. Think about it. You have an increment in your medical aid of 5% or 7%, let's say, give or take 10%. Your electricity bill goes by 10%, petrol price goes by 15%, and all that. You end up in a minus in your own salary. And they can't afford these medical aids. We see it every day as practitioners. Many people have actually fallen out of these medical aids. They are actually joining the low cost. My colleague will know. I'm in one of the committees with them. They are pushing the low cost benefit schemes to try and bring the question that you asked earlier on.
Yes.
Why are low cost people not invited into the playground? And it's because of this increase or increments which are not kept or they are not looked after. The health market inquiry that actually CMS knows, and we know, all of us, recommended very well that these guys must disband these multiple options in the medical aids.
Yeah.
Because it's the one that is causing all these increments, which actually is non-adjustable. So they must go back.
We'll talk a little bit about that suggestion on rearranging and reviewing the benefits itself. But Mr. Maswanganyi, let's bring you in here. So during the time of the pandemic, as they say, you had already set that particular cap. And there were three options, I guess, that were available to the medical aids. It was either the deferment or it was either they facilitated some kind of a delay in the increase and maybe bring that back in a little bit later. Or as you are suggesting now, they set a particular cap in terms of how far they could increase. Did any of these interventions assist during the time of the pandemic, or did we find ourselves with members having to pay even more later on when the medical aid schemes themselves decided to bring back those increases after the deferments?
Actually, it's worse.
Sorry, Dr. Donald, let's have Mr. Maswanganyi respond there.
Okay, sure.
Thanks, Tabo. I think, firstly, I need to agree with Donald that the circular that we issued is recommendations. And the reason why we're issuing recommendations is because we are a creature of statutes and we don't have the power to regulate prices and contributions. So the best that we can do at this point in terms of our act is to issue recommendations. And with regard to your question in particular during COVID, we have seen that most of the schemes that have the solvency ratio above 25%, which is prescribed by the statute, have taken advantage of our recommendation. In many cases, they have given their members contribution holidays. Some have deferred their increments. But what we prefer for the schemes to do is to give their members some sort of a relief that they will not later want to recoup on, because if you give a holiday in terms of the contributions or a deferment which you would want to recoup later on, then it becomes a burden also on the members. So what we prefer is that if you can afford to, you can give your members a holiday or a break in terms of the increments, or impose a very low increment that will allow you to continue sustainably going forward.
How transparent is this question, before we bring in Dr. Gumede? I'm still with you, Mr. Maswanganyi. How transparent is the situation of reserves that medical schemes are sitting on?
Reserves are not a secret how they are known. So each schemes, also in terms of their financial statements, they will make known what their reserves are. In terms of the law, the reserves are expected to be at a minimum of 25%. And there are schemes that have built larger reserves, more than the 25%, and some schemes are struggling below that. So the schemes are in different financial footings when it comes to that.
Yeah, and those schemes that do have a certain degree of reserves that have been built up, because, I mean, for example, elected surgeries, myself and Dr. Gumede spoke about this during the time of COVID, had to be postponed. So there was, of course, not a lot of pressure on their resources. Are they taking your recommendations as the regulator?
Yes, there are schemes that are taking advantage of our recommendations, and they're using their reserves to provide some cushion to their members. But this has to be done responsibly, because if you just give contribution deferment or holidays, you might find yourself in trouble in the long term. So we want to see actuarial support of the proposals that are being made by the medical schemes, that in the long term, the scheme will be able to continue being going concern.
Dr. Gumede, you're saying things got worse. They didn't really help these deferments, yeah?
Yeah, because you see, like Mr. Maswanganyi is saying, and he's quite right. They actually, explicitly, I'm going to go straight to the point. These guys, what they did is they deferred the implementation of the increment, right, which was 4.2. But, when they came back, then they implement it and make it 8%. Did they defer it? No. Because, you see, they just said, we'll catch you up with you later. So it didn't benefit the patient in the long run. And we're talking about the current situation now, what I'm talking about. You can attest to it. And truthfully, the medical aids, they do not adhere to most of the recommendations that comes from the CMS, because they do their own recommendation. Like he's rightfully saying, they employ their own actual scientists to do the mathematics and statistics, and then give it to them to say, no, you guys need to put 6% or 10%, ignore the other guys. And even if probably even CMS was to find them, because that question I asked once upon a time, to say, why don't you find the schemes who actually don't adhere to recommendations? And like he's rightfully saying, they don't have the powers to do so. And it's a problem, because you see, you can't be a regulator and you don't have powers to implement systems or things which actually you can see that they can help the industry. And that's where we are at this point in time with CMS. There's lots of loopholes, and there's a lot of things which actually are not working because they cannot execute them, because they don't have powers to do so. Because the medical aid will be quick, I promise you, to go to court and say, you don't have powers to do what you say we must do.
Work that's being done for medical aid schemes to work for low-income earners. That is our focus next when we continue here on In Focus. We're asking you the question, do you think enough is being done, certainly to ensure that low-income earners also begin to reap the benefits of medical insurance? You can let us in on your views, 072-110-5584, or you can tweet us tonight at Newzroom 405.